Healthy soil, healthy food, and vibrant communities. That's why we're here today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Megan Filbert, and I'm with Practical Farmers of Iowa. Accompanying me behind the scenes and providing tech support are Jason Tietrich and Maddie Mueller. We'd love for you all to use the chat box to comment on your name and your location so we know who's all here with us today. We will shortly be broadcasting live with Tom Wynn, Jim Funke, and Connor Allender in Jamaica, Iowa, to learn how they're working together to improve the health of the soil. But first, we'd like to thank our major sponsors for their support of our virtual field day season. Thanks to Premier One Supplies for sponsoring this specific field day. Premier One, located in Washington, Iowa, has been providing electric fencing and electric netting, sheep and goat supplies, clippers and shears, ear tags, poultry products, and expert advice for over 40 years. I'd also like to thank our Level A sponsors, seen here on the screen, and our Level B sponsors for helping make 60 virtual events possible this field day season. And guess what? You can attend all of them free of charge. Thank you, sponsors. PFI is a community of over 4,000 members committed to building resilient farms and communities. We are a farmer-led nonprofit based out of Ames. We specialize in farmer-to-farmer knowledge sharing and farmer-led research. Learn more about us and access our vast collection of resources at practicalfarmers.org. This field day will run until 3:15. If you have questions for Tom, Jim, or Connor during the field day, please type them into the comment box on Facebook, and I'll relay your questions to the farmers. Also, at the conclusion of this event, please give us your feedback via the online survey. We'll post the link in the comment box. Virtual events are new to us, and with your help, we are excited to learn and improve throughout the summer. All right, now we'll go live to the field. I know the farmers have a lot to share with us, so I'll turn the reins over. All right, Tom, take it away.
Coming in okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So this first image you're seeing on the computer screen is a Google Earth image of what Iowa looks like 500 miles off.
Tom, we're having a little trouble. Can you put your back towards the wind? Yes.
Okay. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. As you can see, Iowa is such a lush green landscape in the winter, in the summer, excuse me. We have great soils. We have enough rainfall. All you have to do is just plant a seed and it will grow. Iowa has some of the very best and productive farmland in the world. You know, I'm lucky that my ancestors settled in Iowa 145 years ago. I'm lucky to have inherited a little of this lush green verdant farmland too. That puts me in a very exclusive club in the world. I figure I am not in the top 1%, not in the top 0.1%, but in the top 0.03% of people in the world owning something as precious as the best farmland in the world. Next slide, please. This is where I live, Greene County, Iowa. I live in the far southwest central part, south of the little town of Cooper. And this image is seen at about 40 miles high. Everything still looks lush and green in September of 2019. Next slide. We've zoomed in a little bit more. We're now about 2 miles high, according to Google Earth. And you can clearly see my farm in the black box. My sister, Janet Dewan, and I own a 160-acre farm in southern Greene County. This aerial photo was taken in September 2010. And you can start to see some very light colored areas on the farm on the west edge. You don't see these areas very often in the other farms that surround me. Let's go to slide 4, Megan. So if we zoom in further, we can see these light colored areas, and they have extremely poor soils. Some are on slopes, some are on ridges. It's a moraine that runs through this area. They're sandy, gravelly, and very light colored. It takes regular rains throughout the summer to harvest any type of crop from them. And as you can see, I have put some of these soils into CRP over 19 years ago. So in the 165 years that this farm was converted from native prairie, and the 145 years that my ancestors have owned this land, the soils have deteriorated. The organic matter has gone down by, I think, roughly 75%. The topsoil has moved down the slopes to the lower areas, and some of it by now is probably in the Mississippi Delta. All of this has made the soil health, and especially its productive capacity, go down. So as a member of this very exclusive worldwide club of the 0.03 percenters, you know, I feel a certain responsibility to do something about this. You know, as the world's population increases, we need more productive land, not less productive land. So the question is, what can I do about this? If you go to slide 5, Megan.
We're there.
And I joined PFI in 2014, and then I attended the 2015 annual conference, and I heard keynote speaker Gabe Brown. Gabe said that you can grow new soil or regenerate soil in a matter of years, not decades or centuries, as I had believed. This excited me, and it started my long quest to learn more. So I went on 2 PFI-sponsored bus trips to Gabe Brown's farm in North Dakota, Dave Brandt's farm in Ohio. I attended a couple PFI 3-day conferences by Fred Provenza and Annabelle Portamengo. I attended Greg Judy's 3-day grazing school and several other conferences. And what I have learned about regenerating soil is really summarized in the NRCS's guide on improving soil health. 5 things: keep the soil covered with plant growth or residue. 2, minimize soil disturbance, mechanical and chemical. 3, increase the diversity of plant life. 4, keep some type of plant or root growing as long as possible during the year. And 5, put livestock on the land, integrate livestock. And if you use managed intensive grazing, it really accelerates the soil regeneration process. Although I didn't plan on converting to organic production, it started to make sense in my case, especially with adding livestock. So as a 69-year-old person, I didn't want to start a cattle operation or sheep operation or poultry operation. And it'd just take me too long to become good at it or to make a profit. However, I have neighbors and friends who do know how to do this. So why not partner with them? You know, I need the exercise. I don't need the extra responsibility. I could be like a hired hand to them for the livestock. So I called neighbors and friends with cattle, sheep, and poultry. So Megan, I think we can go to the live stream now.
Excellent. Thank you for those remarks, Tom. And we are now live to you in the field.
Okay. I'd like to introduce these 2 friends of mine. The tall guy is Jim Funke. He's a farmer that farms about 2-3 miles to my east. And Connor, she lives down the road 2 miles to the west. And you'll see them a little later in the 2 pre-recorded videos that we have. Thanks. So what we're doing is we're standing in area 1. And this is a field that has been no-tilled for about 10 years. This is the 3rd year that it has been in alfalfa. And we have been taking about 3 alfalfa crops per year. Some of the thinner areas on the field we've been grazing. And where I stand, the alfalfa looks pretty good. So some of the thin areas we have drilled in some winter annual rye, just to get more biomass to grow in those areas. So I turn this over to Jim now, and Jim is going to talk about some of the difference in this field, how the soils vary, differ so much as you go from one place to the other. So Jim, I'm going to give you my earpiece. Okay, does that work? Okay, Jim.
Jason, can you unmute Jim?
Yeah, this is Tom.
Jim, are you able to unmute yourself on your phone?
Am I muted now?
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. I just want to talk about where we're standing here in this spot right here. If Chris will kind of zoom in, or well, zoom out and kind of focus across, you can see we're kind of on the ridge of some of the poorer soils right here in this area. And right dead in front of us, if the camera's showing it, is a dark strip that extends across this ridge. And that's where we bale grazed last winter and the winter before, even though this was existing alfalfa already seeded then. Here's a picture. Here's a hole we dug with what the soil type really is. It's pretty light, sandy, but it's actually changed color quite a bit since the bale grazing and stuff. We're gonna walk 20 feet across the fence line, or well, away from where we didn't bale graze, and look at the alfalfa stand, the ground cover, and the soil type there. So I think the difference should be obvious. The soil type is not that much different, but we didn't bale graze here. And this is just what the improvements we think we've seen in 2 years of bale grazing in the existing alfalfa field, and how much difference it really made.
All right, Jim, let's go back to Tom for a few remarks.
Okay, as Jim pointed out, if you look at this area right here, you can see bare ground here. And remember, this has been after 10 years of no-till and 3 years of alfalfa. And if I look down and see bare ground, and this is spring, the first part of June, we've had some moisture. Just think what this will look like in July and August with those thin soils. You know, we'll get one cutting of hay off of this at this, and this will be it. And this is not very good hay, as anybody can tell. And that may be it for the rest of the year. So the soils are so variable in this field that as you either plant a crop on it or alfalfa or whatever, the yield will go up and down a tremendous amount. And so I can't imagine that when this area was prairie, that this soil was this bad. It had to be been better because of the carbon. I think it's the fact that we've lost 3/4 of our carbon here, that the soil has lost its resilience. And as such, it just doesn't have the capacity to make it through dry weather. So I think that's all the remarks I had at Area 1, Megan.
Great, Tom. We're going to now show the video with Connor and have her explain poultry while you travel to the second area.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Connor Allender. I'm a senior at the Greene County High School. I'm in 4-H and FFA, and today I'm here to talk about poultry. I live down the road from Tom Wynn. I have geese, ducks, chickens, horses, and Scottish Highlander cows. I was approached by Tom about early winter last year to raise pasture poultry. He thought it would be a good idea to help improve his soil here on his farm, so I agreed, and we are now here over a year later with 38 chickens and one cool mobile coop. So we bought about 50 chicks last year from Hoover's. We have Rhode Island Reds, Barred Rocks, Silver-Laced Wyandottes, Red Sex-Links, Americanas, and then we just bought 20 white leghorns. So currently we have a vast color scale within our egg production, and we are hoping to get a few more different breeds in to expand that and to expand the chicken manure part of our operation. Okay, so last spring we needed a mobile coop, so we bought an old livestock trailer. It was baby blue. Right now ours is white. We painted it several times to get rid of that color, and we fixed it up and put in a nice floor and all the good toys for the chickens to get a great egg production and manure. And so we'll give you a tour of it here in a little bit. So we've had the chickens for over a year. We put them out in the pasture late this April, so they've been out here a few months and they've enjoyed it quite a bit. And ready for the tour? So this is what we call our chicken guard. It keeps the flying predators away, like hawks. So if a chicken needs to come to safety and there's a hawk out, they can run up close, and this will stop the hawk if they try to attack too close to the coop. And then this is our ventilation. We have it all the way around the length of the coop, and we have them propped up with sticks, and there's hardware cloth underneath, and then just hard plastic. And this keeps off the rain from getting in between the plastic and the trailer. And then this is our big door that we use to get things in and out, like our feeders and our water, or to put more chickens in or out. And then this is our hose to connect our tank. We have a water tank we bring up in our Kawasaki mule. We hook it up here, we pump the water into the watering tank, which is inside. We'll show you what the tank looks like later. And then this is our hitch, which we hook up to the mule. Tom found this in his junk pile and wanted to use it, and so it was a money saver, and it's so easy to move with this, and it just moves left and right. It's a lot easier to move than most trailers. And then the inside, it's a lot more interesting than the outside. So this is our rollaway nest box. The eggs, after the chicken lays the egg, it rolls down underneath. And they come out here clean most of the time without any pecks. And this is the color variation we were telling you about. The Americana laid the green egg, and the brown egg would be from a Rhode Island Red or Silver-Laced Wyandotte. And then here's a little darker one. But we have different colors of eggs, which a lot of our customers really enjoy. And then our next thing is our watering tank. So here's that hose that leads to the outside. And then we have 4 nipple waters underneath. So the chickens, we train them at a young age to use nipple waters. And then this is an insulated tank. There's a smaller tank sitting inside this barrel, and then there's spray foam around it. And then this is our feeder. We feed cereal rye, cracked corn, a mineral supplement, and soy supplement. And we have 3 PVC pipe feeders. And then this is our roost. We can fit about 35 chickens here. And then they roost among our other pipes and logs in here. And then this is our floor. we do not use a hardwood floor because this way it's a lot easier to clean and we get more manure this way. So it's a layer of cattle panel and then a layer of hardware cloth. So it's pretty sturdy. And and then we have a piece of plywood down here for the chickens in case they don't want to be standing on the hardware cloth. And then this is our automatic door that we set on a timer right now, so it closes at 8:45 and it opens at 10 in the morning, which gives us time in the morning to move them if we need to, or whatever in case the weather's bad, and we can adjust the timer to however we want it. And so it makes it a lot easier instead of coming out every morning and every night to open it up. So I have been doing this with Tom for the past year. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. It was a fun learning experience. I built a pretty decent egg production business off it. We sell 10 to 12 dozen eggs right now, and we get about 3 dozen eggs a day. So I'm hoping within the next few years we will be able to improve Tom's soil with the poultry, and we should have about 100 more chickens by the end. Thank you.
Great. All right. Tom, you are live again.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Well, I'm standing in area 2 of my farm. And this area was, again, some of the poorest soil that I had on my farm. So it was in no-till corn production in 2015. And I don't remember ever harvesting any corn or beans to speak of in this area here, which is maybe a half an acre in size, this little spot here. And there was hardly no crop that you could harvest there. And when you got done harvesting there was hardly any residue to speak of, corn stalks or bean residue. It wasn't enough to even cover the soil. And oftentimes you could see corn cobs from 2 years prior that had not deteriorated, because it just didn't rot away. So in 2016, we took this area out of crop production and we put it into first spring annuals, a diverse mix of spring annuals, about 12, 15 species, grazed that twice. We planted summer annuals and grazed that once or twice after that. And the whole purpose of that was to get the soil biology working again. And then in that fall, we no-tilled perennial pasture mix, again, a diverse mix, into this area. And today, this area now produces forage. So you can see around me, we have a diverse mix of crops. Foraging, it grows fairly well. Now, Jim is going to talk a little bit more about what he does for grazing, and then talk a little bit about the soil improvements that he's seen here.
And Jim, can you unmute yourself from your phone again? There we go. We can hear you.
Okay. So as Tom said, this stuff was all row crop before I came on board with Tom. And the first year we did the cover crop grazing. Some of the time we were moving the cows even twice a day. Somewhat to mitigate having to be out here twice a day, we use this bat latch, which hooks onto our electric fence, and you set up 2 paddocks for the day. And at a certain time of the day, you want to give them 8 hours, you just program it for 8 hours later, and it opens up the fence to the next paddock, which takes a lot of the work out of moving cows all the time. It seems like
Jim, it does help if you keep your hand by your ear to block the wind.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So anyway, this is, I believe, the second year that this has been in pure pasture, rotationally grazed. We've already grazed through this area once about 3 weeks ago. We're set to come back in here next week. And you can see that the growth around us is just tremendous. And to give it some perspective, right where Chris is standing, Chris, come this way and then do back that way. One of the spots, the badgers dug a hole, and you can definitely tell what type of stuff we're dealing with. Not that the whole, but a considerable amount of it is this type of soil. And standing behind Tom, or in the piece of ground behind Tom, is another piece that we seeded down that's going to be permanent pasture starting after this year. We'll probably make hay or graze it lightly once before the end of the summer. And it'll be pasture next year.
Jim,
So
what's it seeded down with?
I didn't hear you. What was that?
What's it seeded down with?
Oh, the same mix that we used on our other ones, about 6 different species of grass, red clover, some grazing alfalfa, 5 types of grass. Yep. So yeah, so that'll put us upwards of about 50 acres of grazing for 42 head of cows for next year. So, anything else we need to add?
I think Tom wants to interject a few comments here.
Yes. Okay, can you hear me now, Megan?
We can.
Okay, well, the point is that we've proved that in a period of about 5 years, we can take some soils that didn't produce anything for us at all. Probably we lost money farming them, and now we get a crop. It's not corn and beans, but it's a forage crop, which has value. And this area I'm on right now, which is again the porous soil, is not as good as the soil is 50 or 100 feet away, but we'll graze this maybe half the number of times that we'll graze the best soil here. We'll just put a poly wire around some of the porous areas and graze them half the number of times until we get enough residue on the ground to protect the soil and build it up. So we're managing these spots very selectively and improving them by where we allow the animals to graze. This soil will never be as good as the soil in my lower ground, which is really excellent farm ground. But this soil now produces something where it didn't before. So I think that's all the comments we have out here, Megan, at this time.
Excellent, Tom. We will now view Jim's videos with the cattle while you travel to the house.
Okay, thank you.
Funky, and these are my cows. I'm a neighbor to Tom Wynn, and I've had my cows here going on 4 years, I guess, going on 5 years. We're in the middle of calving right now. I backed my calving up from February, March to May, June. It's worked out really well. The calve on the grass just all around works a lot better. We're grazing a brand new pasture we seeded 2 years ago that's a mix of about 8 grasses and red clover, just kind of a myriad of things. We're a little concerned about bloat because of the clover came so strong in the pasture. You can see that we've mowed strips, or mowed quite a bit of it actually, to try to wilt the clover before we turn the cows into it. Something else that we implement on our farm, Tom kind of got me started on, was we're using a cafeteria style mineral program. The cows pick what they need or what they think they need. Each compartment has a different trace mineral, that sort of thing. It's really kind of interesting how we track it through the year. You can tell almost what they're grazing, if they're grazing cover crop residue or they're grazing corn stalks, how they change their mineral consumption from one to another. The paddock that we're standing in right now, these cows have been on it since about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's 6 o'clock tonight. You can see there's still quite a bit here yet to eat. They'll probably be on it. Well, I know they'll be on it until 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Seems like they've ate about half of what we mowed down and half of what they could graze themselves. So you can see on the behind me over here to my right is where they were grazing today. And like I said, they've ate basically half of what there is out here to eat. And then Tom is scanning around to tomorrow's paddock where we've got a heavy grass area that we didn't mow down, but this new pasture up in here is so heavy with clover we decided to try to wilt it down before the cows actually grazed it. You can see kind of right here in front of us how thick the new pasture really is with clover. So I'm standing on the edge of Tom's CRP field that's probably on the highest point of his whole farm with the poorest soil types of any of it. And as you can see where I'm standing here, it's really pretty good forage. We've grazed it with annual crops for 2 or 3 years, and then last year we seeded the pasture and made it for hay once, and now this year it'll go into full grazing only. And you can see that the soil is completely covered with plant material, roots, leaves, everything. And then you get 10 feet away from it, further up the hill into an area like this, where it's mostly gravel and not much growth. And what we're really hoping to do is improve this by using the cows and try to make the whole farm better. And that's where Tom came to me looking for ways to improve it, and had read a lot about the cattle improving the soil, and that's kind of where we're headed. One of the keys to the system that we're using is water. And we firmly believe that if the cows can see the water, that promotes them coming up to get a drink individually, as if they have to travel for water very far, then they tend to go in a herd. When they go in a herd, then they end up standing around the water, and most of your manure ends up close to the water tank in that area. This way seems to make the manure more spread out in the paddocks and whatever. We have this portable tank with a float in it. We move it usually every other day. We put it on the paddock line and eliminates moving it every day. We try to do it at least move it every other day. Otherwise you do get a mudded up area around it. Tom's gone to the effort of piping in water to virtually, we've got about 50 acres of grazing now, and we virtually have got water access points on 50 acres of it within easy walking distance or easy moving points. On the crop ground, we've got a well down in the waterway, and the crop ground has a water line buried till we get up here to the CRP corner, and then it's nothing more than just blue plastic well pipe laid on top of the ground here. And then every 100 feet or so, we've got a quick couple that you just snap in the garden hose connector, and you got fresh water again.
Okay, Tom. Great, we can see you in your living room. Tom, can you unmute yourself? All right, we can hear you and see you.
Okay.
All right, I'd love to invite anyone who's tuning in to start asking questions. They are now out of the wind, so we can hear them well and ready for any and all questions. So please chat them in the chat box. And Tom, while those questions are coming in, any other remarks that you'd like to make?
Well, I just think that this has been an educational experience for me to uh, learn about the soils. I knew nothing about soil life, and it turns out that farming really hinges on soil life. And especially if you quit using chemical fertilizers, if you go to organic, you depend upon the health of the soil to produce a good crop and healthy crops. So never thought much about that when I conventionally farmed many years ago. So just this whole process of learning about soil life has been kept me challenged, and learned so many different things that I'm just amazed that we all take this for granted, but it turns out that it is really a key component of farming. So Jim or Connor, do you want to say anything?
I do have a question that came through the chat box, but first I'd like to say hi, Dad, from Afton Funke, who just commented. So we do have a question from Heather. How do the finances work? Are you working under a lease? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we've got a different arrangement on the forage areas. That's the part of the operation where I'm especially trying to improve my soil health. So I'm doing things that probably don't make as much money as if you farmed it. And so I've taken that under my part of the operation. So Jim pays no land lease on any of the forage areas. I just simply charge Jim a fee for grazing his cattle on the land. And as the soil quality improves, I'll get more forage out of it, and I'll get a higher income from Jim, because I can have cattle on there a longer period of time for the summer. And then on the crop land, we've got about 100 acres remaining ground that we farm organically, and that's a conventional 50-50 share right now.
So I guess more to that.
Go ahead, Jim.
I pay Tom per animal grazed per day. Is basically what I do. That way it works out. There's times that we don't have anything to graze, and we'll feed hay for 2 weeks at a time. So I'm really not out anything. I don't get charged for those days, but I also have a place to keep the cows permanently, and he gets the manure that comes from the hay that gets fed.
Let's see. Hopefully we don't have any more feedback. I'm curious, someone asked, do you actually have a written lease or an agreement?
Well, we've got 2 or 3 actually.
Yeah, we've several drafts of it, and we're working on it over time. So, because what we're doing is, not very conventional. So that's why it's nothing that we'd like to share at this point, but at some point we probably could.
Great. We have a question from Dan. Do you have problems with weeds?
Well, are you talking about in the pastured areas?
I'm not sure what he was talking about. Dan, if you could tune
Well,
in again.
right. Well, I'll at least address it. Yes, we've had Canadian thistle in our pastured areas. Some pastures have very little, some pastures have more. I now know what not to do to encourage Canadian thistles. And so our very best pasture, which is where we were at in area 2, has hardly any weeds in it. And the reason is because that has been in the perennial pasture the longest period of time, and through mob grazing or MIG grazing, the sward of grass has become thicker and thicker and thicker. You go out there and you can hardly find any areas where you can see the ground anymore. And if you can keep the ground covered with forage or with residue, you just don't get many thistles coming up. So I'll walk through that pasture once or twice a year, maybe spend an hour out there and, work on a few small thistle patches and other things, but that is about as clean as could be. My newest pasture is terrible. I had an annuals for 3 years, summer and winter annuals, and all that tillage and and then planting and live grazing and all that, somehow a patch of thistles started. And so I'm going to have to work on that now that I just seeded in perennial pasture. Probably do a lot of clipping of it and mowing it. Try not to spray it if I can help it. I'd like to transition it into organic at some point. I'll let Jim talk a little bit about the weeds in the fields here, in the crop fields.
Well, this is our first year of actual organic farming, and so far, foxtail is going to be our biggest problem. As far as the pasture ground, I definitely say with Tom, the Canadian thistles are the worst thing, and I don't know if we'll ever get them all stopped. Like you said, the newest pasture is the worst, but it's the youngest too. So as far as the crop ground, though, I think foxtail is probably going to be our biggest problem there.
Thank you. I have a question for Connor specifically. Someone asked, do you think free range chickens possibly challenges conventional chicken barns?
Yes, pastured poultry and free range are way better than conventional. And that's one of the reasons why our clientele is so good right now, because people do not want those store-bought eggs. They realize that farm fresh eggs and free range is much better than store-bought eggs. They can definitely tell in the taste when they eat them, and then they compare it, and they tell us how great our eggs are, because that our practices are much different than conventional farming.
Thanks, Connor. I have a question geared towards Tom. Have you tested for soil organic matter, and do you have some before and after results?
You know, we don't, yes, we do a soil test every 2 years, and the average for the farm is about 2.4% organic matter. If you consider the very best, which is at 5% down in some very low areas that were wetlands at one point, and the very worst where we were at, which is probably 0.5% organic matter, if that, then the average is about 2.4% for the whole farm. Now, the areas that we've been working in, I was on a zoned area process, and I haven't been able to follow exactly how my improvement has improved the soil organic matter. But we've done some Haney test also. And Haney looks at some of the biological health of the soils, and the Haney tests have gone up both in the area where we've done a lot of grazing and also in the crop ground area. And the Haney index, I believe, started out about 7 in 2 areas, and now it's over 15 in the area that I'm grazing. And that was a year ago, so it's getting better. So I can tell soil health by the Haney test is what I'll probably primarily look at. And then by just looking at the sward of grass in the grazing areas. You know, it's difficult to walk through a really good pasture. It is so thick and so lush. That is the first indication. The second is by the mineral feeder that Jim was talking about. The cows just almost quit eating minerals. They'll eat some vitamins out of that, but hardly eat any minerals when we get out of good pasture. So that's telling me that the biological life in the soil is providing all the nutrients the plants need, and in turn, all the nutrients that the cows need. So those are the basic measures: mineral usage, the Haney test, and soil test, and then just by observation.
Thanks, Tom. There's some chatter in the comment box about the positives of free choice minerals. And Sherry from Southwest Wisconsin says she also uses cafeteria minerals. She's loving it and the health outcomes. She asks, are you bale feeding in the winter on that gravelly or sandy area to attempt to use the cattle to incorporate more organic matter in that location?
Definitely. And we tried the bale feeding, as in stationary bale feeding. We don't really like the outcome of that so much. We've gone to just unrolling bales everywhere, like those ridges that we showed earlier on the live feed, where you could really see the change. And unrolling the bales, even though you do have to start a tractor every day, seems to be the benefit's a lot better, I think. when we tried to bale graze, we always end up with a ring of something, either matted into the mud or whatever, that you can't hardly manage the next year, whether it's just too much residue and nothing will grow there is usually our problem compared to the unrolling.
Thanks.
I would like to add that I keep a chart, which you can't see. Maybe Jim, you can hold that a little closer to the screen there. This is the minerals that we've used since 2016, and I can email this information to anybody who wants. But I plot out all the usage of all the 16 different types of minerals or trace mineral mixes there. And when we first started this process, cows ate a lot of trace minerals, and then now they hardly eat any trace minerals. And so, like Jim was saying, it's really been interesting to watch what they change, what they eat different over time through the season too, summer to winter, and then sometimes pasture to pasture. For example, if it's an area that I've been mob grazing for a while, they don't eat many trace minerals or hardly anything. But if I go to the crop ground, where it hasn't really been in any type of forage system, it's just been crops along vegetation, all of a sudden the usage of P and K go up, especially, and the trace minerals go up too. So there's another indication that the cows are telling me that the plants, the forage, the residue in those areas that have not had this intensive improvement of soil health, they just don't have the same type of level of minerals that does in areas that I've been working in. So it's just watching this usage of the trace minerals, these 16 different minerals, has just been really very interesting.
Thanks, Tom. Mel asks, how does erosion compare to when this land was in row crops?
Well, there's no comparison. We have stopped erosion on where we've seeded it down, period. There's no erosion. We mob graze, the infiltration rate has undoubtedly gone up. I've yet to measure that yet, but I just don't think you can hardly get any water runoff of my perennial pasture that's been in pasture for probably 2 to 3 years now. If it's just a brand new pasture, there'll still be some water runoff for a couple of years. But after 3 or 4 years, I just don't think there'll be any water runoff at all. Jim, you have any comments?
No, I think the other thing about it is we've kind of cherry picked where we're going to address in the crop ground. We've cherry picked the areas that we're going to grow crops on and have intensive tillage on those areas being organic. Most of that ground is not going to be erosion prone anyway. And the cows are adding to that. Otherwise, we'd try to farm those ground too.
So we have a local tuning in, Chuck Offenberger. And Chuck says, what do you three think is the long range impact for farming in our area of what you've learned so far in using livestock to regenerate and rebuild the soil? And will it change what most farms look like out here? Big one.
I don't know. If I wasn't semi-retired and if I kind of didn't feel this responsibility just to improve the soils, I'm not sure it'd make a lot of sense for me to do this. It's just far easier to do conventional tillage. You don't spend hardly any time. You do farm a large amount of ground. But at my age, 69 years old, I don't need the money as bad as I did when I was younger. And I enjoy seeing things improve. I just like to make things improve. My whole life, I've been trying to tinker with things. And now I'm tinkering on a big scale, a 160-acre farm. And the life that I see come back to the farm, the birds that we have around here, it's just amazing to go out in Jim's cows and see a flock of 500 birds out there, right in the nuts mixed the cows. I never saw a flock of 500 birds when we conventionally farmed this. And I find all types of small wildlife on the farm too, because of the pastures and more birds. For me, that has a lot of value. For a large farmer that has to go over a lot of ground, I just don't think maybe he has the luxury to do that. So, it may be a little hard to do it. Going organic is one way to kind of justify that. You get a higher premium, and you can be a little better to your farm that way. But I don't know, Jim. What do you comments?
I can't see it catching on a huge scale. This is kind of a niche, I think, for us. You're not going to graze, probably not going to graze cattle on 1,000 acres of crop ground, or convert a huge area that way. So no, I don't see it catching on huge.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. We have a somewhat related question about with wildlife. Jorgen asks, have you seen any wildlife responses in the pastures? And he's thinking specifically about birds.
Right. No, I think, like Tom said, we've seen a lot more birds than ever. They seem to follow the cows. I suppose it's the insects as much as anything. There's food there for them, following the cows, and it's nothing to see 10 birds on the back of a cow in the afternoon.
I saw a quail family of little chicks 2 years ago on my farm. I don't ever remember seeing quails before on my farm, and of course we see pheasants and all of that, and so I see more than I've ever seen before. Can I say anything, Colin?
So I think we have another local online, Barrack Fall. He says, I remember when I lived up the road from Tom, Dad would get minerals from him, and you could just look at the cow and see the change. He asked, Jim, can you see any changes in your cows, specifically from the minerals?
To me, that's been the hardest thing to quantify. I was just on a standard mineral program, feeding the same mineral on the same feeder year round, and I don't know. If Barrack sees a change in them, there must be.
I love the locals that are chiming in. Okay, Laura asked, do you have any other ideas in addition to the livestock integration that you're excited to try?
Well, the one thing that we've toyed around a little bit with is with sheep. John Merrill, who I've worked with in the past, has had a few sheep out here. I normally have a couple around the place, but and that's one thing I'd like to do, is try to integrate a herd of sheep in with Jim's cows. Haven't really gotten there yet, but I think there's some benefits to multi-species grazing, and and that might help with the thistle problem too, and the other weeds that we do have. So that's something I'd like to see. And I think the pastured poultry, even though Conrad has a pretty small scale and she's not doing any broilers yet, she's just doing laying hens, a broiler operation of some sort. I've just seen wonderful responses to the soil, to the broilers, pasture grazing. So that'd be something that I'd be open to, but I don't know if I'm young enough to do that.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. Question from Margaret. What kind of incentives might be needed, in your opinion, to encourage wider spread adoption of your practices?
I think you should start with the younger generations of farmers. The teaching the younger ones first, and then those practices set in. So like all the kids, the graduating class, we have several kids who come from family or farming families, and if kids like them and other kids throughout the United States, the ones who are beginning to get in that phase of farming, if we could teach them those practices early on, then they could teach their next generations, and we could start more organic practices and see that all over the United States.
Connor, you basically read Nick Odie's mind. He asked, what do you think needs to happen for more young people to do what you're doing, building innovative businesses and markets from scratch? Do you want to elaborate on that a bit more?
Well, it starts with the young generations. I did it because I raised chickens since I was like 10, and then Tom brought this proposal to me last winter, and so that's how I started it. And I tried promoting that within our FFA chapter. So our FFA chapter has poultry, or we had previous years, and we're going to do a new plan next year, hopefully, to integrate layers and production hens into our FFA chapter. And so hopefully that will help stem the younger kids, like the freshmen and sophomores who are in FFA, to do that also. And hopefully that will be something they can keep doing until they become adults. Because it's a great way to get the experience and get to know people. I've created lots of relationships with business people, with just customers buying the eggs, and it's a great platform just with organic farming and pasture poultry.
And Connor and Tom, can you remind me, was your FFA chapter written up in the local paper, and Tom read that, and that's how he heard about you, or remind me of that?
So when I first started FFA, I sold fruit to Tom several times, and then my mother was put in the paper because she was the first woman in our Greene County FFA chapter in, I believe it was 1970. So he saw that in the paper, and that was one of the ways we brought in the connection to have me bring poultry, because that was also mentioned in the article.
Wow, that's so uplifting. Thanks for sharing. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, so we'd love to entertain a couple more questions if anyone has them. And I'm curious if any of you have any last comments.
Well, I've got, do you have any last comments you want to make?
I was just going to say, along the lines of getting people started into it, one of the things would be it takes a really unique neighbor to ask you to come try something crazy like this on his farm, and you don't find those very often.
Did you say crazy?
No, I didn't say crazy. Did I say crazy? I said unique.
Unique. Okay, we do have one last question. This is from Dan Turner. He asked, do you know whether there's a net greenhouse gas benefit from what you're doing?
Well, I've heard that doing MIG grazing is a net benefit.
And Tom, remind us what that means again.
Yeah, negative carbon. You actually can get a carbon credit. So by doing the intensive grazing we are with perennial forages, we're putting more carbon in the ground than the production of the beef is putting out in the atmosphere. So if we weren't doing this, there'd be more carbon in the air. By doing this, there's actually less carbon in the air because our carbon is going back into the soil where a lot of it started from. So yes, it's negative carbon on the managed intensive grazing. And I did want to have just a concluding remark here that to kind of summarize this, and that is I'm accomplishing my goal of improving my soils. We have a lot of activity around the farm. I've gotten a lot of exercise out of doing this, which is great at my age. I've gotten to know my neighbors better, and there's a lot of activity going up and down my driveway. If I was conventional corn and beans, I'd have my tenant here 3 or 4 times a year, and that would be it. You'd be here on the farm a couple, 2, 3, 4 hours, and you'd be gone to the next farm. So it's brought life to my farm, both in terms of the soil life, the plant life, and the community. There's a lot more people come to my farm here because of what I'm doing here. So it's enriched my soils, and it's also enriching my life too. So,
Tom, thank you for that closing remark. I don't think it could have been more spot on. And luckily you can't see me, but I'm almost starting to tear up over here. So I do want to make an announcement here since we're reaching the end of our time. You can find a full list of our upcoming virtual field days at our website. And also we want to remind you to please take a few minutes to complete the evaluation that we just posted in the comment box. For participating, you'll be entered to win a PFI water bottle. And more importantly, we will receive your feedback and make these as best as possible. Tom, Jim, and Connor, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to host us at your farm. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We'd love if you could like or share this live event so we can reach more people. And Until next time, please stay healthy and get out there and enjoy this gorgeous day. So thanks again to all of you. It was very wonderful hearing from you and seeing you.